Welcome, everybody, and thank you for chiming in either live or on the recorded version of this. I know a lot of people actually watch the recorded version, so I hear. So thank you for doing so, everybody. Um, right off the bat, before we even get into our little PowerPoint presentation, I do want to discuss the idea that this is not a normal season. Normally, you want to build with a shorter run, like a 5K, 10K, like the Santa Monica Classic in September, which right after that race in mid-September is when the Roadrunners will start up again, the third week of September, 2025 this year. But, then you want to jump to like a half marathon, which we would have done with the Rose Bowl half in January, except for the turn of events with the fire, the Eaton fire, and all of that. When you can't breathe, it's really difficult to run a half marathon. And then we would have done the marathon, which we did just last weekend, which was exciting and amazing and all that. But so now they postponed the half 6 weeks later, which is now a little over 5 weeks from now, 5 weeks and 3 days or whatever it is. So we now need to taper from our from our long marathon in order to that's what you need to do. You need to take time off. This week was hopefully you didn't do too much, if anything. I think really we're cranking out some schedules for the Rose Bowl half, and this week really included a lot of just plain walking. The more sedentary you are after a race like a marathon, the longer it will take to heal those tiny little filaments where single molecules of protein, these little beads of protein, strung together make up one little filament. And you have millions of these little filaments that come together and expand, called the sarcomere. You have millions and millions of these things. They're submicroscopic. That's how tiny these things are. And they tend to break and they tend to knot up. And that's what foam rolling helps with. And so that's what we want to heal. Now, having said that, I'm just kind of muting everybody. There we go. Having said that, it does take, generally speaking, about 3 to 4 weeks before those little tiny filaments heal. Stretching is also important right now. But it does take 3 to 4 weeks for those little tiny filaments to heal. So healing is a big process of this week and even next week, and to some degree the week after. But really, we're going to have it this week is just a total blowout taper, pretty much nothing but walking, maybe a little jogging or really low heart rate, what we call zone one recovery run, if even that fast. Got it? Rarely in the season do we ever do a zone one recovery run. Usually most of our work is zone two. We're talking about intensity, heart rate, training. In order to build endurance, we run in zone two, which is about 65% of your maximum capacity for running, that kind of thing. At any rate, so next week, the schedules are going to be posted online soon, and I'll be sending them out to the pace leaders. I have one already. I'll have another one this evening. And so you can probably get some of those schedules from your pace leaders. We're only going to have 3 schedules this season for the Rose Bowl. Um, I just, I don't know, we decided we really didn't need all 5. But because it's the volume that you're going to be building to is much lower than the volume that you did for the marathon or even the half marathon, what would have been the volume for the half. It's going to be a little lower. We don't want to have you taper down and then jump you up too high. We're going to jump you up high enough Um, you know, like 8, 10, 12. Faster group will be even more like 14, 15 miles for a peak run. Um, well, you're looking at about the mid range at about 25 miles. Um, the slower group would be less than that, and the faster group would be more like 35 miles in a week. I haven't done that schedule yet. Something like that. So it's not going to be a huge jump back into the game. But don't forget, you have an enormous volume of endurance, from all those zone two, low heart rate, what we call conversational paced runs where you're running and you can chat without having to take a quick, noticeable pause for breathing, kind of like what I'm doing now. That would be maybe a little too fast if you were breathing that hard. That might be like a little zone three, high end zone three, rather than zone two, where you're really building endurance. Um, so, with that in mind, let's get the PowerPoint moving here. Whoops. And then we can uh, continue from there. And I think you're kind of seeing this now. Whoops. And here we go. There it is. So once again, thanks everybody for coming out today. And here we go. If you have a body, you are an athlete. I want to tell you something. If you have crossed the finish line on a marathon, you are a marathoner. And that is something that nobody will ever be able to take away from you the rest of your entire lifetime. And that's exciting and that's extraordinary. And less than 2% of the US population will ever be able to say, I am a marathoner. So, congratulations to all of you who just finished the LA Marathon, the 40th event of the LA Marathon. As exciting as that was. So, oops, that's me. Here we go. Good. All right. I want to start with kind of a sad note, but end on a happy note. A lot of people who finish a marathon finish feeling kind of depressed. You've accomplished your goal. You've gone through a long season. You've gone out in the rain. You've gone out in the cold. You've gotten up early in the morning when everyone else is asleep in the warm bed, and you've put yourself through a series of things that at times were uncomfortable. Most times, hopefully, were enjoyable. But pardon me, you achieved a goal, and um, a lot of people, after they cross that finish line, will feel depression, and they will feel like, oh my God, well, now what the hell am I going to do? That's over. I really miss it. I'm really sad. I miss Saturday mornings. Obviously, in this case, you won't miss Saturday mornings whatsoever because we're going to be back at the totem pole, and we're going to be back at the children's playground in Griffith Park, and we're going to be back in Encino at the golf course, the driving range parking lot right over there in Balboa Park. We're going to be at all three this weekend and all through the rest of the off season, even let alone the Rose Bowl season. In Santa Monica, we always turn it over to the running club. And so you'll see the running club awning, not the Roadrunner awning, but most of your pace leaders will all be there. And same thing with Griffith Park, that we have USA Marathon training there. And we're also looking to have Cafe Jam help us out with the Sunday ongoing after the Rose Bowl there. Will help us out, hopefully, to keep it going on a Sunday morning. And Gracie and her group and all those guys. So that's in Balboa Park. This is the rest of the season till the third week of September when we start it up all over again, right? So if you're feeling depressed, the happiest people that I know are people with a goal. And I will talk about that after the Rose Bowl. We did do a video a few weeks ago about how to create a new goal. But the key here is create a new goal. I remember that a friend of mine's father was extremely rich. I mean, really, really wealthy. He owned a steel mill. He owned like a big racehorse that raced all the famous events. Um, uh, he owned a huge mansion in the nice neighborhood, with acres of land and whatever. And I remember overhearing him say, somebody asked him, what was the happiest time of your life? And he said, this is a guy who's got more than everything. He said, the happiest times of my life, oddly, was when I was struggling and I was kind of going higher and higher and gaining more and more money, but still struggling. He said, was the happiest times of his life. And I say that to all of us, you know, um, get a goal because that's probably where you're going to be the happiest in your life is with a goal. And it doesn't need to be running. It could be anything. It could be, you know, um, I don't know. It could be creating a new algebraic calculation or something. I have no idea what that would be. I create a goal for yourself. Um, it could be getting faster. It could be increasing volume. Generally, increasing volume will get you faster, but you don't want to increase volume too much, as what you're about to hear me talking about later. Um, you don't want to increase volume too much too quickly, or as I already talked about, really. And again, Saturday, 7 o'clock, bring your medal, bring like a little dish with like 5 servings of something. It could be a half pound of pasta salad or chopped fruit from Ralph's or a salad. It could be something you cook at home, like a pot of rice. It could be, a gallon or two of juice. It could be, bagels or something. But leave all that in Santa Monica, bring it out and put it on the picnic table when you first arrive. In Griffith Park, you could probably do the same. In Balboa, we're so close to the cars, you could just leave it right at your car. Um, all that stuff. But wear your medal. We're going to have like a 2 mile run for most of you in all three of those locations. Um, Santa Monica, we're basically running down to California Street and back, the next street down. And then the faster groups will be going down to the hotel, Shutters and back. Griffith Park, you guys are going to run just a little beyond where the school is, where the trail meets the other trail, kind of, and then back. Or the faster groups will be running all the way down to the picnic area and back. And Balboa Park, you guys are going to run out to the pond and back, or the faster groups will run out to the pond and around the pond and then back. So that's what we're going to be doing first thing at 7 o'clock. Chances are somewhere around 8 o'clock we're going to have the potluck. So Balboa Park, go to your car, get a warm coat, get for everybody, bring a warm jacket. And oh, by the way, Santa Monica, we're meeting at the totem pole. We're not meeting because they have picnic tables there. We're not meeting at the Fairmont the rest of the season because it's with the running club and not us. Well, sort of, kind of. So we will not be at the Fairmont. We can't just bring food into a vendor area, so to speak, where they sell food. We can't do that at the Fairmont. At any rate, so that's this weekend. And also, like I said, create a goal. And I'm not going to discuss goal setting. Um, The higher the volume, I did mention, and we'll discuss this in future lectures, the higher the volume you go, the more you do. When you start off, you can look right here from 0 to 20, you're skyrocketing in ability. And many of you who started from couch potato to marathon, when you first started out, your ability, you probably jumped to another group, a faster group, as the season progressed. But as you progress, 20 to 40% is still skyrocketing, 40 to 60% still doing pretty good, 60 to 80 less. Now, 80 to 100, certainly 90% of your maximum ability to 100% of your maximum ability, that you gain from training. You do have diminishing returns. Okay. The problem with all of this, the more you do, you get to a point where you're doing less and less and less, as this graph clearly indicates. The problem with all of this is there is an inverse relationship to injury. So when you're going from 0 to 20%, there's really not a lot of risk of injury. When you're going from 40 to 20 to 40, now it starts to begin a little more. 40 to 60, now it's suddenly going way up, and 60 to 80 and beyond, it's even higher and higher. It's just skyrocketing. Risk of injury. That's the term. Setbacks really means injury. Setbacks don't necessarily have to be long term. They generally are, rarely are they permanent, and even then you can heal. But there is a general risk of setback, a little, a week off or 2 weeks off or whatever it is to recover. You never know. But the more you go, the higher the volume, the greater the recovery time needed, and greater because of the greater risk. And you'll notice with our schedule, as we get way, way, way up there, even the faster groups, we tend to not go by 3-week build and a 1-week taper. We'll go by 2-week build and a 1-week taper, or even a 1-week build and then the final 3-week taper after that. So you have fewer build weeks and then followed by a taper week when you're really up there in volume, specifically, and you'll see this next season as well, specifically to avoid the risk of injury. So I just thought I'd throw that in for an understanding of where to begin with next season, what to think about. When you want to do more, yes, there is this risk. And that's the same thing with your training for the Rose Bowl Half Marathon. If you want to dive back into it before you're really fully healed, again, you don't need to have 3 to 4 weeks. You don't need to be fully recovered. You don't need to have all of those little tiny filaments healed and back straight and working, functioning perfectly again. Because every run you break up a few of these. Soreness is when you're breaking up a little more. Injury is where you're breaking up so many that it's really painful and it's debilitating. That's an injury. But it's the same thing. It's just a progression from, a little breaking up and healing, and then a lot of breaking up and soreness, and then more breaking up of these filaments, and now you have an injury. So, not doing too much too soon and allowing your body to heal to a point is important, but you don't have to be 100%. That's the key. If any of you have those watches that give you recovery ability, you don't have to be 100% recovered to want to be able to go out and train more. You don't want to get too low in needing too much recovery, because then you're really injury, risk of, higher risk. So now, in the off season, for those of you not doing the Rose Bowl half, and I'm just going to go through this really quick, because after the Rose Bowl half, I'll kind of be giving this lecture again, and then a little more in depth. But for those of you not doing the Rose Bowl half, who want to know what the heck do I do now so I can set myself up in the off season to be amazing, even better. My goal is, like you heard Mel, you heard him. Next year, he came in at 252. Next year, he's breaking 250, and that's his goal. So, where does he and all of you set yourself up to have that new goal, which is exciting, that new goal of going faster in the next season, if that in fact is your goal? You need to build more endurance, meaning low heart rate volume, zone two, which you can't really see because my little thing, there you go. You need to strength train. The more you do, throughout the season, the more you break down muscle tissue, and yes, you do rebuild a lot of that during these taper phases, these interval tapers throughout the season, every fourth week or every third week, and especially the last 2.5 to 3 weeks where we taper a lot right before the race. That those are critical to rebuild muscles and all that. But this is a great time to really, truly not only maybe rebuild muscles, but maybe get stronger than you were before you came into this whole thing. And that includes, leg muscles. It's not just upper body, but we also do benefit from strength training our legs. To what I got this from a physical therapist I know named Robert Forster. We want to bulletproof yourself from injury. That's a lot of what sprinters do. They need, because they're so pounding sprinters, usually right after, almost always right after a sprint workout, sprinters are in the gym doing strength work. Then maybe they'll take a break and then they're in the gym doing strength work. But oftentimes it's right after they finish their sets of sprinting at very short distance. Keep in mind, they do not need any endurance. That's not what 800 meters is all about at all, or 200 meters or 400 meters or whatever. It's about speed. It's about power. It's about generating high volumes of power. It's about using a resource for fuel that we don't really even use, creatine phosphate. We do use glycogen at high heart rate, which they will eventually use even on a 100-meter sprint. But they don't do as many, their training is totally different. They don't do as many, sets and reps as we do as runners. They do, like 8 to 10 sets of high intensity repetitions, and then they're in the gym to rebuild strength. And that's a critical part of what they do. And it can be a critical part of what you do, especially this time of season when you have more time to do it in. So strength train, you could do it in a gym, you can do it with home weights, just your normal body weight, rear lunges, squats, Kersey squats where your one leg is going kind of behind you, so you're extending your hip a little. You could do it with hand weights while you're doing these squats and lunges and whatever, for your glutes and your lower back. Things like bridge where you're lying on the ground, lifting your hips up with your one leg. Core work, you can do dead bug. All of these things are really, really good. Even Pilates, yoga, all these things are really good strength training moves. And then stretching. Stretching is really great to elongate the little springs that hold these things apart, shall we say, these sarcomeres apart. And that's important to stretch them, which is very different, by the way, than the foam roller that's designed to flatten them out if they're knotted up, or like the gun that has that vibrating gun on your muscles that's also designed to kind of flatten out those filaments that may be kind of knotted up or whatever. Stretching, it does something slightly different, and it's important. High intensity interval training, you could do some of that during the off season. Keep in mind, you lose speed very quickly. You don't lose endurance, the low heart rate work, the fat burning aerobic work. You don't lose that anywhere near as quickly as you do the high end, the high intensity, what we might call zone four work. Um, so if you're not going to stay consistent and you don't want to stay way, way up there, if you keep your ability, your fitness level at the same ability that you were at with your marathon the whole off season, you're doing like, excuse me, 17, 18-mile runs, 20-mile runs, um, long volumes during the midweek, like you were doing with those long runs on the weekend, I pretty much guarantee there is a huge percentage chance that you will be injured. Your body will shut you down. Your central nervous system needs to relax, along with healing all of those muscles and rebuilding strength. So, really, shut it down. Next week will be a taper week on the schedule. It'll have more than this week, obviously. And then we're going to jump up at about 50% increase in volume because you don't lose that much. You're not going to be anywhere near where you were 3 weeks ago, or even last week when you did the marathon. You won't have that volume to do at all, not even close. But you do with every training season, you do want to start at the beginning and build again because your central nervous system needs to relax. You cannot stay up there that high for that long. Your hormone levels will become depleted. Until you stop or until your body gets injured and forces you to stop. And then your hormones will come back up to normal. If you're feeling like, gee, I really don't want to go out and run, it's because your hormone levels are depleted. And that happens after a marathon. That's why this week it's best do very, very little. I knew a woman once who I've mentioned this before. I kind of met her. She was the coach of a good friend of mine. She came in like seventh in Florida Ironman, and then she did Wisconsin Ironman a week later. A week later. Keep in mind, Ironman ends with a marathon after a little 112-mile bike ride, and before that, just a pitiful 2.4-mile swim. But she won the Ironman in Wisconsin 1 week later. Well, psychologically, it was her favorite race course. She loved that race course, and it is quite the hilly course. But um, um, 1 week, well, what did she do? She did absolutely nothing, but some stretching, a little light strength training, nothing that 1 week, which gave her a solid recovery. And she went back into it 1 week later after doing nothing, just recovering completely. Keep in mind, it does take, 3 to 4 weeks to fully recover, but her hormone levels were back on full because she did taper and peak and taper and, the normal training season. And she won, which is shocking. So, but after that, she just shut it down. That was it, because she didn't want to be injured. There was always that fear. So again, high intensity interval training, a little bit, don't go overboard with it unless you're consistent. Flexibility, mobility training, where you're stretching, you're foam rolling. There are mobility movements, which you can find on YouTube, online, that give you greater mobility. They're a little different from flexibility in that stretching is static, generally speaking, where you're just holding that, you're holding that stretch, where mobility is more of a fluidity to it. But at any rate, that's a whole other lecture. And then 3 hours a week. Oh, that's actually a whole different thing. Ignore that. My apologies. Um, oh, yeah. I Let me go back to that. Um, General health studies now include the fact that you have enormous benefits from exercising at the minimum of 3 hours a week. Well, right now, this week, you need to do less than that. You need to recover because we've been doing way more than 3 hours a week. Well, double that, more than double that. At any rate, um, if you do 6 hours a week of training, even way more benefits. The benefits include living longer. Not a bad thing to live longer. I would enjoy that. Um, and also far less risk of illness, severe illnesses such as cancer, diabetes, all those things that can kill you. But at any rate, so even in the off season, there are three forms of exercise that you most benefit from in terms of health. One is aerobic work, which is we do a lot of that, and that's a great thing. Also builds endurance. Like I said, you can go farther with just general stamina, at work or whatever, just from low heart rate, slow endurance building. That's one thing you need within these 3 to 6 hours or more a week. There are diminishing returns when you get beyond 6 hours, but at any rate, there are still benefits, but not as many after 6 hours. The second thing would be high intensity interval training. Not a lot of it, but once a week, there would be a value to that. Builds brain cells in certain parts of your brain, all sorts of things. High intensity, it strengthens your cardiovascular system, certainly. High intensity interval training, HIIT work. The third thing would be strength training. So there you have it. What do you do in the off season? Things that build your health, right? Aerobic work, zone two, running, um, strength training, and high intensity interval training, but not much of that. Pardon me. Good grief. I have not been getting a lot of sleep lately, which is not good. Okay. So I've talked a lot about this next category of recovery and how in our case, how it's going to, feed into what you do for the Rose Bowl half. You don't want to take 6 weeks off before the Rose Bowl half. Hopefully you only need like one or two, this week in being one of them. Do not do an extremely long run. Do not do high volume this week. I hope I've already hammered that in. You do want to slowly build back 10% at a time. We've done a lot of volume already, so we will eventually, like I said, be kind of plummeting up, diving upward into, well, like half of what you were doing at peak just a few weeks ago. So it's not beyond anything that you're not accustomed to. Do not do too much faster work. Like I said, right now, more pounding is going to break up more of those filaments. You could do like 20% a week of high volume work, but now you really need to recover more, break up less of those muscle tissues, less high intensity interval training. Eat more protein. Like I said, these little filaments are made of all protein, 100% protein filaments, and just beads of molecules of protein that make up these little filaments that are so small, they're submicroscopic, Um, and eat healthy forms of protein, which I need to get this week more protein in my system. I need to go shopping tonight. So we already discussed that 8 to 9 hours of sleep, which yours truly, me, is not getting right now because I have so much work to catch up with, both with, creating schedules and answering emails. I apologize. I have not been getting to my emails. I'm way behind, like 3 weeks behind on emails. It's pitiful. At any rate, try and get 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night. And that's when you regain the most hormones. When you're the first hour of sleep, in fact, is when you build the most hormone levels in your body. So try and get 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night the next few weeks, especially before the Rose Bowl, and especially before your first real set of training this weekend. Although we're not going that far, but take a taper week every few weeks, every fourth week, every third week. Um, these are built into the schedules you've had. They will be built in the schedules you'll get for the Rose Bowl. Like I said, we're not going to have 5 schedules for the Rose Bowl. We'll only have 3 because I think, the volume is so depleted, so much lower. We don't really need 5 different schedules. Um, some maybe of you may want to do more when you need to rebuild hormone levels in muscle tissue. The answer to that in doing more is don't rebuild muscle tissue and hormone levels and all that. A lot of cases, your hormones rebuild muscle tissue. They don't just give you energy, they do help rebuild muscle tissue. For example, human growth hormone helps rebuild muscle tissue. Creatine kinase helps rebuild muscle tissue. All and other hormones do the same thing. So there you go. You make gains not from your actual exercise, but during periods of recovery. That's where you make the gains. So if you don't have good volumes of regular recovery, which include that week after a 2 week build, you may not you may re- you may not be able to recover 100%, and you may not be able to come back as strong and fast or injury proof as you might otherwise want to be. So good. And then or very, very again, I said strength and stretch and all that stuff. So good. Concluding, as I always do, train smart and train to win, because if you don't, you won't. And if you do, darn it, you just might win, that is. And there you go. I thank all of you for chiming in on this recorded or live version. Those of you on the live version, please stay on the line. We're going to get to your questions in just a minute. Those of you watching the recorded version, I want to thank you for chiming in. I will see you all at the finish line. And here we go. I'm going to turn this off as soon as I figure out how. Whoops. Hang on. There we go. I'm going to stop sharing. And here we go.